UVA football. The Andy Poland Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Poland Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
So it's a common phrase in the NFL or football in general. Next man up. Somebody gets hurt, and the next guy behind him has to step up into his position and play well. So Washington is going to go the rest of the season without one of their top players. Jonathan Allen out for the year after surgery on a torn chest muscle, the old torn pec. So he's out for the year. And Johnny Newton, come on down. Rookie defensive tackle who they got in the second round out of Illinois. He's dealt with some injury problems as well, but is apparently healthy enough to play. So he's stepping in, and we'll get to that, plus more on the Commanders. And baseball, how about that? It's been a long time since we had a Yankee-Dodger World Series, which, you know, when you look at it, these are teams that spend money. I think they're the top two spending teams in the sport, and they have not met in the World Series since 1981, which was the third time they had met over a 5-year period. Remember, the 77-78 matchups were classic, with Reggie winning Game 6 in 77 with 3 straight home runs off 3 different pitchers, and then they met again in 1978. The controversy there was there was a rundown with Reggie, and I guess today with the replay he would have been called out, but he stuck out his hip to knock away a ball, and that played a big factor in them winning a game. Yankees probably a better team. Then they met again in 1981, and that gave us the famous George Steinbrenner comment about Dave Winfield. He's Mr. May, that Reggie Jackson had been Mr. October, and Dave Winfield, who I think went like 2 for 26 in the series in the postseason, was Mr. May. Couldn't perform then. That's a guy that George battled with for a long, long time. When he signed Winfield, when he became a free agent, he gave him a contract of $10 million, which was an unbelievable sum of money in those days. It was a 10-year deal, but it included an escalator in it for inflation. And so George wound up paying more than $10 million for a guy he never liked. And then there was the 2-year period. Actually, this saved the Yankees. It was a 2-year period where George was suspended from baseball because he paid a guy that I actually had dealt with. He called him a stringer. He'd go to games and get interviews with players in the locker room and then feed tape out to the network. Those guys were called stringers, and this is how Spira, and he paid Spira to dig up dirt on Dave Winfield. Kind of a long-winded way of saying, looks like we're going to have a Yankee-Dodger World Series, though anything can happen. It's not over until it's over, as Yogi said. And last night it was the Dodgers really cleaning up the Mets and all their hand-wringing about Shohei Ohtani not performing in the postseason. He hit a 2-run homer to help cement the game, 8-0. So it's L.A. up 2-1 in that series. And later today, the Yankees have a chance to go up 3-0 on the Guardians in Cleveland, so they move a step closer to meeting in the World Series. All right, let's get to the next man up story here with the news that Jonathan Allen is going to be out for the rest of the year. He's had surgery, and I don't know about his future because his contract next year is not guaranteed, and the way this organization seems to be going, and the fact that, he was okay in the first 6 games. Really hard to tell on a defensive scheme because a lot of times the tackle's job is to tie up offensive linemen so linebackers and secondary guys can make plays. But I would say that for the money that he would be due next year and the fact that he's over 30 years old, I would say the chances are pretty good that either he restructures his contract and takes less money, or they say, thanks a lot. You've been a good soldier here, but it's time to move on. This is Dan Quinn, though, yesterday with kind of a hats off to one of his team captains and the way he has handled everything.
Yeah, I thought, what a great line by John. Just, as opposed to, hey, don't feel sorry for me. Here's a good chance for you to get more chances, more opportunities. And that's what a leader does, knowing that there's other guys in the room that are, will step up, specifically Johnny, and knowing that they're ready to take that challenge on. But I thought that was a great moment by him of allowing in his space of a tough and dark time to say, this is a good opportunity for you, man. Go get it and go take it. And everybody deserves those chances when you go for it. And this just happens to be one of those times when, and all of us have been in that spot, like, hey, man, this is your chance. And you absolutely go for it and go for it as hard as you can.
And then with Johnny specifically, but then that kind of D-tackle rotation, how will that change, and what are expectations changing for Newton?
Well, it'll certainly change the rotation. Sheldon Day will also be a part of that moving forward. FA is somebody that can work inside and outside. So, but it'll change the rotation of people for sure with a heavier load for Johnny, no doubt about that.
And as for Newton, who has had to come back from injuries, remember he missed pretty much all of the off season recovering from foot surgery. Then he had surgery on the other foot. Ready to go, ready to step up as the next man up.
Just take advantage of every opportunity that I get. That's my mindset. No matter what the circumstances. I talked to John. He told me what it was. I was like, I just know it's my time now. I don't want no drop-off, so just go in there and play the same level that he did.
With John out, how do you maybe rely on him a little bit to kind of help you in this role?
Yeah, for sure. He's been in a role since I've been in middle school, so a vet with a lot of experience. I'll be picking him, Duran, Sheldon, all the vets in our room that's been there before, that's played a lot, and just relying on them and leaning on them with film and helping me throughout the process.
Johnny Newton was a basketball player. I think he played for the Knicks years ago. Bobby Wagner, who calls the defensive signals. If John Allen was in the NFL when Newton was in middle school, then Newton must have been like in elementary school when Bobby Wagner started in the NFL. He's 34 years old, been there, done that, ready to captain his defense without a star defensive tackle.
I mean, obviously that's a big loss for us. He does a lot for us, and we're definitely going to miss him. We just got to communicate more. Obviously, those guys are getting some run, but I think just extension of communication, understanding that they haven't played as long as Jay has, so we'll be fine.
Yeah, and look, here's a question, and this is going to be continuing till they get to, ironically, it's November 5th, which is the trade deadline. But in the next couple of weeks with this team and the fact that they are 4-2 and very much in contention to win the division, what will they do? We've seen them. They didn't go for Brandon Ayuk, and Ayuk re-signed with San Francisco. They did not try and make a deal for Adams, who winds up with the Jets. They have been very careful about what they have done. But as you lose players, the question becomes, do you, with an eye on winning the division, try to pick up a veteran here and there from another team to try and shore things up. Quinn yesterday, he didn't really fully answer this. He kind of danced around the question. But I think if you read between the lines and the way that they are trying to develop this team for the long term, there's not going to be any short-term spending here or short-term shedding of draft picks to try and bring in a veteran to go for it this year. They'll go as far as they can, it sounds like, with what they got, but you never know. I mean, you could be surprised at what they do over the next couple of weeks. But this is Quinn yesterday on the question of whether they try and acquire talent with these injuries now starting to pile up a little bit.
And that's a good question for Adam, but we talk about the team all the time, so although there's a deadline, it doesn't mean there's a time that you have to begin that. And so we spent a lot of time on the roster and the team, and you're right that we did get banged up into some spots, and that's why we are fortunate that the practice squad is bigger, than it was years ago. And you guys can remember that when, there was 4 players, and then the street list was different, and you went through that. But now there's I feel like a really good developmental plan of people that are in the building and practicing and playing. And so when those opportunities come up to go deliver, and although people may have not played a lot of reps, they get their chances. And you probably heard me say it before, but J-Mac is certainly the one that comes to mind for me of when his number was called, you get ready to deliver. And that's just such a pure example for us.
Yeah, I mean, that's the exact meaning of next man up. And the next man is in your building. It creates a lot of, camaraderie. I guess is the way to put it. J-Mac, by the way, is Jeremy McNichols, who played really well in Brian Robinson's absence, and Robinson is back on the practice field, so they expect him to play Sunday in the game against Carolina, and that's good because he's their leading rusher. Even as much as Jaden Daniels runs, he is their leading rusher, and they're very happy to have him back for this week. We'll get more into Jaden Daniels and some, they asked him some People magazine questions yesterday about the attention that he's getting, and I found it to be so refreshing and so good. All the RG3 comparisons, you may find those on the field. Off the field, they are two different guys, and I would say that's a really good thing. We get to this national story about Tom Brady, which, on the surface, doesn't seem like a big deal. He's been approved as a part owner of the Raiders. He owns reportedly I think it's 10%, about $220 million that his company has put into the team. And he's going to be active as an owner there. He's not going to just, be a limited partner who's going to cash a check from that. He is going to be involved in talent acquisition, which makes for a very interesting situation given that the league now has what they call Brady rules in his job as a broadcaster with Fox, that he cannot attend practice. He can't go to those insider meetings and talk to the coaches and the players as they do the day before the game. And so he's somewhat limited in what he can do because he's an owner, and it creates conflict of interest. Tom Pelissero covers the NFL for the NFL Network. He was on yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show, and the question came up, okay, now that Brady is approved as an owner, what does this mean, and what is it going to mean in his ownership role with the Raiders?
Well, to hear Mark Davis talk about Tom Brady now being a part of the organization, not just as a guy who owns 5% of the team, but he was asked yesterday about, well, Tom can't play anymore because of the NFL rules now. You can't have an employee that owns a piece of the team. And Mark said, well, he can't play quarterback, but he can help us find the next quarterback and maybe train him. When's the last time you heard that a minority owner was going to be training and identifying the next quarterback of the team? It's very evident that Tom Brady is going to be really, really involved in personnel operations. Right now, Tom Telesco is the general manager. He's in communication with Mark Davis. It was Mark Davis, making abundantly clear that they were not going to pay money here on Davante Adams. I would certainly anticipate, and Mark Davis has always done this, Dan. He's always leaned on a lot of his former players that he's had in front office roles or informal advisor roles to the team over the years. Now you happen to have the greatest player who's ever done it. But, let's be honest here. This was about Davante Adams driving this, wanting to go to New York, the Raiders setting a price. And then over the past couple of weeks here, as the talks progress, the Jets were willing to up the ante, even though they didn't get to the full second-round pick.
Conflict of interest with Tom Brady as a broadcaster, as an owner. The NFL, I know, had some stipulations here, but do you see any potential red flags down the road?
Well, there were teams that specifically raised this issue and voiced it to the entire membership. That's part of the reason why it took a year for Tom Brady to get approved, in addition to just the valuation that he was going to pay on that 5%, 10%, if you include his partner's share. The issue becomes if you have a member of an organization, a part owner, who is in these production meetings. And on Friday and Saturday, you're given a lot of information and there's a trust factor involved there. I don't think that anybody sits back and goes, Tom Brady's going to leak that to the opposition, but a lot of people within the league uncomfortable. So Brady has not been in, to my understanding, these production meetings. Certainly different teams can set their own guardrails of what he's allowed to see, because normally the broadcasters are at the entire practice on Fridays. They get to see stuff that even the normal media doesn't. I'm sure there's some people in the league who are probably like, it's Tom Brady, who cares? Or I know him personally here. He's not going to screw me on this. There's our teams that are going to follow the letter of the law. But, I've consumed a decent amount, Dan, of Tom Brady broadcasting. I think that from the first game where it was fairly apparent that he was a little nervous, and, it's the first time, you probably remember this, your first time on SportsCenter with producers talking in your ear and trying to figure out, and the rhythm of it's just different, even if you've done different levels of stuff. it was the first time for him. I think he's gotten better and better. And, when you have that volume of his history here, you don't necessarily need to relate the anecdote of what the offensive coordinator told you the day before.
Okay. And that's fine. And he may actually like doing the TV, especially now where he doesn't have so much work to do. He can't go to practice. He can't go to the production meetings. So he can pretty much fly in the day of the game if he wants to, do the game, and then fly right out. He could do that. The issue for me on the conflict of interest, and you heard Pelissero say that he's going to be involved in developing quarterbacks. If you've ever been to a game early and you look down on the field, what you see on the sidelines is a lot of people milling around like it's kind of a cocktail party. And, people renew old friendships and this, that, and the other. And Brady would be down on the field before the game. That's, part of what you do as a broadcaster. You want to get a look at guys up close. You want to see how the field looks and things like that. What stops him from sidling up to a particular player who's going to be a free agent at the end of the year and making overtures to him? Nothing. And there's nothing that would stop him from doing that. And, I don't think that other owners have that kind of privilege. I don't think. I think it gives them really an inside track and maybe an unfair advantage. And, when we see a guy sign with the Raiders next year, you're going to wonder, well, and the people will be looking at the video from pregame schmoozing and, go over it like Zapruder style. Ooh, look at this. They shook hands. He put his arm around him. Yeah, who knows? I think it's a bad look, and if it wasn't Tom Brady, the league would do something about it. But, I guess he's royalty. They don't want to touch him. Sure, he's got contacts, and he can call anybody he wants to, and anybody's going to take his call. I understand all that. But if you're going to have these rules, why have them not apply to Tom Brady? It just does not seem to be fully kosher to me. Meantime, the NCAA has closed up the loophole, which was a factor in Oregon beating Ohio State over the weekend. It may not have decided the game, but it was certainly helpful to Oregon on the clock as they intentionally had a penalty. 12 men on the field, and although it resulted in 5 yards for Ohio State, it ran time off the clock to the point where Ohio State was trying to get a timeout at the end, and they came up like a second short in doing that, and Oregon held on to win the game by 1. So now the NCAA says, well, yeah, that's not really in the spirit of football that you can get an intentional penalty and help yourself. So now if you do something like that, the offense can choose, along with the 5-yard penalty, to have the game clock reset to the time that would have been displayed at the snap. So at that point, Oregon was looking at more running off the clock than keeping the yardage down for Oregon, because they were not in field goal range yet. They were still out of that, so they knew that if they ran down the clock, that was going to be helpful. And Dan Lanning, the coach, admitted it on Monday. He said, we used 12 men on defense to help run time off the clock. So that's not going to work anymore. The NCAA football secretary rules editor, didn't know they had such a title. The Secretary Rules Editor, Steve Shaw, said in a statement they were looking to take away any gain for the defense from committing an intentional penalty. Football is a very dynamic game. Oh, really? Occasionally, there are specific situations where committing a penalty can give a team an advantage. A guiding principle of the NCAA Rules Committee is that there should be no benefit when a team commits a penalty. In other words, crime should not pay. So what Oregon did, and they're not going to overturn the result of the game, but what Oregon did is no longer kosher and no longer helpful. And if you try it again, it's not going to help you at all, because it's going to give the team yardage and it's going to put the time back on the clock at the time of the snap. So there you go on that. Also, Dan Lanning talked yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show, and he was kind of weaving and bobbing around that one because this hadn't come down yet, so he didn't want to really want to say anything to make things worse for him. But Dan asked him a question. Oregon was, because of Phil Knight, who went to Oregon and is the chairman of Nike and supplies the uniforms to Oregon. He was wanting to display his wares all the time. So they have the most uniform combinations in the country. Different jerseys, different helmets, different pants. I mean, you could mix and match and get 300 different combinations. And they've had some pretty wild looking ones. Well, it sort of started a trend. If you remember this, Maryland has had Under Armour for quite some time. Probably gone back over, it's been about 20 years, maybe even more than that, when Ralph Friedgen was the coach and the head of Under Armour had played at Maryland, Kevin Plank, and so they made a deal. Maryland was the first school they supplied the uniforms. And so I guess, and this is, I think, after Ralph left. I don't think Ralph was, Ralph had been fired after the 2009 season, one of the best coaches they ever had. Stupid to get rid of him, but they did. And so at that point, there was a feeling like, hey, guys are going to play at Oregon because they really think the uniforms are cool. So they came up with these crazy-looking uniforms at Maryland with the flag on the helmet and the whole thing. I never liked those, never did. And Ralph held the line on that. His uniforms were more traditional. You had that script Terps on the helmet. They were white helmets, but similar look to what they had during the days of Bobby Ross in the 1980s with Boomer Esiason and the good teams that they had. He wanted to bring back the tradition. Well, then they went to these cockamamie-looking uniforms, and good for Mike Loxley for wanting to bring back the tradition. So the uniforms that they wear now are very similar to the ones they wore in the 1980s. Well, at Oregon, that's not the way they do business. So Dan asked an interesting question to Dan Lanning, Dan Patrick to Dan Lanning, the coach of Oregon. Do you have a say in those uniform combinations?
I just have veto power, really. I don't want more than that. My wife and our family got to be a big part of the design 2 weeks ago when we did our cancer awareness uniforms. That was something I was a part of, but generally, they'll flash it up in front of me and say, "Are you okay?" And there's every once in a while I'll say, "Hey, that's a little extreme. Maybe we can take that out." But very rarely.
Wait. What's extreme for Oregon football?
I don't know. It's happened, Dan. Let me just say it's happened. Okay. But no, there's just some things where like, okay, let's tone it back and make it about the game and not just the uniform. But that's something that I remember as a GA at Arizona State when we played Oregon and Marcus Mariota's running all over us and those helmets are like mirrors. And I'm like, it's bad enough the guy's running for 400 yards. Now I have to see my reflection in his helmet. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, well, I'm a traditionalist. I know I'm old, but when I see Alabama in those red uniforms, when I see Texas in the burnt orange or Penn State, Penn State with those, some say they look like laundry bags. Those are traditional uniforms. I like them, and it says a lot about the football tradition. Now, Oregon's been doing this long enough, and that's really when they became a powerhouse about the time they went to these crazy uniform combinations, so you kind of accept that. But you don't want to see other types of uniforms from other teams. Nebraska, I mean, these are classics. And you don't mess with it. And I think you sell that to your players, too, when you come in, is that you tell them, hey, you're part of a long lineage, and you're going to be wearing if you go to Alabama, you're going to be wearing the same uniform that Joe Namath wore or Ken Stabler. Those are traditional things. Penn State, same thing. The Franco Harris wore that uniform. I think that's a good thing. I think that's something that's attractive for players, though not quite as good as Curt Cignetti. There's Curt Cignetti, the coach at Indiana, used to be at James Madison, and now has Indiana at 6-0. And the talk of college football, he's doing all these interviews, and he's talked about recruiting, and he said that he got tired of players asking him why they should go play for him, and he said, "Google me, I win." That's the greatest recruiting line I've ever heard. Google me, I win. And it's true. He's won wherever he's gone. And he's winning again at a basketball school, which has been kind of irrelevant for football for a good part of his existence. They last made the Rose Bowl in 1967. So this could be the best team that they've had since then. And, we're talking 56 years ago, 57 years ago. Remarkable what he's done. I meant to mention this yesterday. Tom Lavero wrote a column about the Capitals. He went to opening night there, and the Capitals tonight are finishing up this string of 3 straight home games when they played Dallas. They won the other night against Vegas, and they like to go to 2-1, and they hit the road and play New Jersey coming up this weekend. But he talked about how they did a nice job of honoring the 50 years of the team. You know, they started in 1974. And he said that they had over 70 alumni on hand for the opener, along with a Third Eye Blind concert. And those who attended got a 50th anniversary T-shirt. The cost $19.74, a nod to the 74-75 inaugural season of the Capitals. And this was, he said, then before the opener against the Devils at the arena, the team put on an impressive pregame ceremony for a crowd of 18,573 for the alumni of Capitals players taking the ice for the introduction based on the era that they played in. And he says, imagine if this move to Potomac Yards in Northern Virginia had happened and this was still in play, Caps 50 Fest and the pregame festivities on F Street would have been a wake. With that in mind, it seems that you can't celebrate 50 years of the Washington Capitals without mentioning 80-year-old Virginia Senator Louise Lucas, who threw a stink bomb in Transparent Ted's, that's what he calls Ted Leonsis, Transparent Ted's plans and killed the project. This is a part of their 50-year history. Transparent Ted would like you to forget, since it happened just a few months ago. It's hard to do no matter how many media tours he does to try to speak it out of existence. Without her, Transparent Ted would have been celebrating 54 years of the Capitals in Alexandria. Yeah, he's 100% right. If this team was still on track to move to Alexandria and they had this glitzy opening night the other night, it would have been a sad event, like, oh, this is kind of the end here. We're heading down the home stretch of this. So I think that's an important thing to point out here. And he said it's nice that this happened. And he said the Capitals have long been the best fan experience in town. They make it a party at Capital One Arena, but if Transparent Ted had his way, it would have been a funeral. And I think that's important to point out, and I think it is important to point out the history of the Capitals does include, even though it's recent history, the owner not just flirting, but getting all smoochy with Governor Glenn Youngkin on a deal he said was a done deal. And, hey, the DMV, it's not just Washington, Maryland, and Virginia. Oh, no. It stretches down to Florida and goes all the way up to New Jersey. No, it doesn't. And now he's like, oh, Mr. District, and we made this deal. And no, he got snookered. And it's his own fault. It's his own arrogance. Because if you're going to make a deal, you better make sure that you have the votes. And you better make sure that Louise Lucas can't make you look like a fool, which she did. And so, good for the Capitals for staying in the District of Columbia along with the Wizards. I think that's what most people want. And let's not run past something that you did less than a year ago. Also, I think it should be pointed out how we almost lost the Capitals in 1982. And thanks to the Save the Caps campaign and the trade for Rod Langway, they got to 50 years. A lot of teams don't do that. Kansas City Scouts, who came in as an expansion team with the Caps, have moved twice, and they're now to the New Jersey Devils. So you never know how things are going to pan out. But thank goodness that they're staying in the district and are not going to be in Alexandria, as Ted said would be so wonderful for everybody. All right, coming up, we'll get to what Jaden Daniels said yesterday at his news conference and what Jay Gruden said about his firing 5 years ago. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. Well, they seem to have a quarterback controversy in Pittsburgh. Is it a controversy? Is it just gamesmanship on the part of Mike Tomlin? Tony and Mike tackling that yesterday on PTI. We'll get to that shortly. Also, a couple of days ago, Jay Gruden was on a podcast called Clean Pocket, hosted by Colt McCoy, a quarterback that he dearly loved but couldn't keep on the field because Colt McCoy couldn't stay healthy. But he tells the story of how he got fired 5 years ago. Not that it wasn't justified based on his record, but how it was, ham-handed by the ownership that was in place at the time. And it's always good for perspective on that, I think. The team did a nice thing yesterday in preparation for what's going to happen Sunday. Darryl Green, rightly so, is going to have his number retired by the team. Remarkable career, 20 years with the organization, 7-time Pro Bowler, instant Hall of Famer, one of the great cornerbacks in the history of the league. And was estranged in many ways from the team because of his relationship or non-relationship with Dan Snyder. But that since has been mended, and they fixed up a suite for him and his family for Sunday with all kinds of different memorabilia from his career. It's up on their website at commanders.com. It's really nice to look at. And I know Darryl. I did radio shows with him for 2 years, and I find him to be very engaging. And I'll have some stories to tell you about his remarkable career tomorrow as we get set for the weekend and the retirement of his number. Someday, maybe they'll retire number 5 because everybody's geeked up about Jaden Daniels, and play some of what he said yesterday. First of all, getting his running mate back. It looks like Brian Robinson is going to play after sitting out against the Ravens on Sunday. He's still their leading rusher with 325 yards. That's actually 3 more than Jaden Daniels, who, if you've been watching recently, don't base it on the first game where he ran 16 times and everybody said, oh, my God, this guy's going to get killed. If you watch the way he runs now, he runs out of bounds. He's not trying to squeeze that extra yard. He hasn't had a really big run in a few weeks, but he's still capable of breaking that off, and his running is obviously a big part of what he does. But if you have the complementary back there, as he said yesterday, it makes a big difference.
B-Rob is a special player. How he's able to run the ball, how he's able to break tackles and things like that. And people don't give him a lot of credit for his hands out of the backfield in the passing game. So it's going to be helpful to have B-Rob back. Looking forward to it. But, we got to continue to execute our game plan and play our game.
A couple of other things from Daniels yesterday, not necessarily related to on the field, but they're getting to like sort of these People magazine questions. And so when things kind of bog down, like there wasn't that much else to ask about, he's not, he doesn't have really long answers on anything he says. He'll answer your question. He's cooperative. He's easy to deal with. He just is not one who's expansive in his answers. But they did ask him yesterday how he relaxes.
For me, it's like watching like basketball, stuff like that. I like watching basketball. But for me, it's like when I leave the building, I put in the work throughout the day. When I leave the business, that's my time to relax and regroup and get ready for the next day.
Yeah, some guys watch a lot of tape at night. I guess he does that early in the morning. And a guy after my own heart. Pretty soon he's going to be wearing white belts and going to the early bird. But he does seem to have a clock sort of like an old man. Tom Brady did this too. Tom Brady was a really early riser, early to bed kind of guy. So maybe he studied that as well. But he's not the guy who takes the work home. I admire that. I think that's a pretty good way to run your life. And he says he gets in really early in the morning. And one of the other players last week was talking about him getting in like at 4 in the morning. He's 5 is what they've said. Maybe it's 4, but he's obviously that's a big part of what they like about him is also his talent, of course, and his production, but the fact that he works so hard and prepares. But he says once he's done with work at the end of the day, he goes home and relaxes. The other thing was about the attention, and look, people get mad when I pick on RG3. But he was an attention-needy person, and he's the one that put his wedding registry up on Twitter. He would retweet people's nice tweets about him. He thrived on the attention. He loved the attention. And Jaden Daniels, listen to what he says about this. He's kind of gotten used to it because it's been going on now for well over a year. He was getting this last year when he played at LSU, and now that he's playing so well for Washington, it's ramped up. But doesn't sound like he's a big fan of it.
It wasn't to the magnitude that the coverage that the NFL gets. But, you just go on the media, you go anywhere you scroll, you see people talking about you, good or bad, regardless. So for me, it's normal that last year I was exposed to that, and then You go through pre-draft, you go through everything. You could turn on the TV and people could be talking about you. It's kind of awkward to see people talk about you. I don't really like it, so I kind of try to stay away from that. But it's kind of normal to me now.
Yeah, he does not really like the attention, and it's pretty clear. He certainly doesn't seek it. Doesn't seek the attention, and I guess he's doing some Heisman commercials, the Heisman House, which a lot of those guys do. But I even as he becomes a star, this will be one thing to watch here. How much does he take advantage of what will be offered to him in terms of endorsements, making commercials, things like that? Chase Young. I think this is probably a factor in the downfall of his career. He's still in the league. He's playing now for the Saints. He had a really good Super Bowl, but they chose not to re-sign him in San Francisco. So he's playing for the Saints, and maybe he's going to be out of the league in a couple of years. Certainly not what they expected when they brought him in, where he was supposed to be a game wrecker. But he spent a lot of time fattening up on endorsements and missed all of the off-season workouts one year to go on shows like The Family Feud and take advantage of things. And he was, he's asked about it the second year when he's coming back. And then Ron Rivera said he had a rude awakening, like he can't miss all this time and still be a great player. And then, he got hurt in the second year and, things kind of unraveled from there. But he was asked about, missing the off-season workouts for endorsements. And he says, well, don't you guys need to make money? Yeah, but we have jobs. If we take away time from our regular jobs to do other things, we're not going to have those jobs. And as we're finding out, he's not having the kind of career that was expected of him when he was the number 2 pick of the draft out of Ohio State. It just hasn't worked that way. He was an absolute beast when he played in college. He was tremendous. But aside from 5 or 6 games at the end of his rookie year, and he was Defensive Rookie of the Year, he hasn't shown any of that. And he's done a lot of talking, did a lot of talking when he was here. I don't know what's going on in New Orleans, but it didn't work out. This guy just seems to be the opposite. He just wants to do his job. He wants to study the tape, and he wants to be able to live his life outside of football, away from the limelight. He don't like it. Interesting. All right, a couple other things on Archie. Pardon me, on Jaden Daniels, and this is Nick Allegretti, who I've said. If I were a columnist, I would corner him after every game. He's got, I think, the best insight on the team. Terry McLaurin, some of these other guys are great talkers. They're very cooperative with the media. But in terms of insight, I think Nick Allegretti, who's been at the top with Kansas City, so he knows what it's like to work with the best. And he's discussing here, this is a guy who blocked for Patrick Mahomes. So here he is with yesterday with Scott Abraham, Channel 7, in the locker room on the question that everybody gets and will continue to get as this thing rolls down the tracks for the season, the development of Jaden Daniels.
I've answered this question a few times, and every time I answer it, it's incredible to realize how much better he's gotten since 2 weeks ago when I answered this. He's an incredible professional. The way he carries himself around here day to day, it's really cool to watch him grow this quickly as a rookie. I have loved blocking for him, and the cool thing is each week, the camaraderie is there, but what's really building that camaraderie is the trust. You develop trust with the guy next to you, and then the trust that as an offensive line that we have for Jaden. If he's redirecting protections because he sees something, there's no doubt when he's making a call, switching something like that. And then knowing that he's going to understand rush lanes, and if he's got to scramble, it's a really cool trust that's developed over 6 weeks.
So what he's saying is, because they know he puts in so much time studying, that if he's going to make a call at the line, they know he knows what he's talking about. And this is the biggest thing that rookies usually go through, is they get fooled by a lot of things. That they haven't seen things before, that the defenses disguise and then change it at the last second. He spots things. That's so important. The growing pains that even Peyton Manning went through, and nobody was ever thought as highly of as a bookworm or a tapeworm, whatever you want to call it, as Peyton. Peyton studied the game. That's what, because he didn't have nearly the physical skills that Jaden Daniels has, but he understood where the ball was going to go and how to get rid of it quickly, which is another thing that has been big with Daniels, getting rid of the football. That's why he doesn't take too many sacks, and he's only thrown 2 interceptions, and one of them really wasn't his fault. Well, I guess it was his fault. It was kind of an overthrow, but the only bad one he had was in the Cleveland game, and they won that game easily. It's really remarkable. So when you hear the players talk about him, they don't say, "Oh my God, he's fast," or "Oh my God, he's got a great arm." No, they talk about how hard he works and how much time he puts in to make sure he knows what he's doing. And so here's an offensive lineman who's lining up and used to line up in front of Patrick Mahomes, who's the best in the game right now, and is now telling you, hey, when this guy makes a line call or a change, he knows what he's seeing. He knows, and we have complete faith in that. That's an important thing, and that's like a bonus on top of everything else, because you figured there would be growing pains. And also where he says, hey, you know, the way I answered this question 2 weeks ago is different than the way I'm asking it now, because he's made leaps and bounds from there. And so here we are, basically a third into the season, a little more than third into the season. What are they going to be saying when we get to December, right? I mean, that could be the stretch run to try to win the division. It's it's an excitement that we haven't felt around here in a long time. And Dan Quinn, remember how he handled all this in training camp, that he didn't give him the job right away. He said, he's competing with Marcus Mariota. When we think he's ready to play, we'll make him the starter. Daniels was fine with that, fine with competing for the job. Now they got their guy. And, barring some catastrophic injury, they got their guy for a long, long time. And here's Quinn, who has coached top quarterbacks in the past, and he was in Dallas last year with Dak Prescott. He was the defensive coordinator, but he has seen good quarterback play, and he has seen franchise quarterbacks, and he knows he's got one now, just 6 games into his career.
Everybody, that's the name of the game, to say at a position that affects the outcome so much, decision making and processes to go. There's so much that goes into it. And so for me, getting a chance to be around excellent quarterbacks and seeing what it looks like, and knowing that we have an excellent quarterback here, it's fantastic. I would say the common thread on that is relentless work ethics. And I've seen it with Jaden and going back through Dak and Matt and on the way down the line. That is a trait that definitely sticks out to me. There's just so much preparation that can go, and finding the right balance of decision-making, competing, knowing, making the plays go right, speeding up throws. It doesn't just get seen on just the way he's throwing it. It's in the way that he's playing the position. And oftentimes things that don't show up on the stat sheet are really a big deal. Dirting a ball that's in a 2-minute that wouldn't go for anything. That was an incomplete. Well, it was actually a really good play that, like we didn't do a hell of a lot of coaching on. It was like him being like really smart to go nail that. So those are some of the traits that it does. And it definitely, knowing that person's there and fighting shoulder to shoulder with you. I love Jaden, what he brings to us, and I can't wait to see him grow, man. He is absolutely relentless about it.
Yes, a couple times that Quinn has mentioned that play. It was near the end of the first half when they were trying to preserve time on the clock. And if you're watching on TV, Tony Romo said this in the Baltimore game. I think it was the Baltimore game. Yeah, I think so. Maybe it was the Cleveland game, where he was throwing to Austin Eckler, and if he'd completed the pass, Eckler would have picked up like a yard and burned some precious time off the clock. So he knew, he could see where the defender was. He threw the ball in the dirt. He said, dirting the ball. That means that it was an incompletion on purpose, which if you look on the stat sheet is going to look like an incompletion for a guy at one time was completing 80% of his passes. But that was a good play. That's better than a completion. And those are things that it would seem that it would take you a long time to grasp. And he's grasping them now. You're probably going to get tired of hearing it. I don't get tired of talking about it, because this walk in the desert that has been going on with this team. Really, they've been trying to find a franchise quarterback here for over 30 years. Heath Schuler was drafted number 4? I think it was number 4 or 3. Man, maybe it was 3. Yeah, it was 3 in 1993. So over 31 years ago, they tried to draft the replacement for Mark Rippon, who, Rip is not a Hall of Fame quarterback, and it was a 6th-round pick. He was an MVP of a Super Bowl, but he was not a great quarterback. He was outstanding that one year when they won the Super Bowl, but they've been trying to find that for all these years, and now finally it's happened. It's absolutely remarkable to think all they have been through and trying to find. They've had some good ones occasionally. Brad Johnson had a really good year. RG3 had the spectacular year. Kirk Cousins had some really good years, but they haven't found this until now, and it is exciting to talk about. Jay Gruden fired 5 years ago on a podcast the other day with the backstory of that, and I don't know whether you laugh or cry at these old stories about Snyder, but I got a little chuckle out of it. Maybe you will as well. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Graham is coming up at 11 o'clock. What's today? Today's a Thursday, so I guess Tony's off, but Tony's new spot is 2 o'clock. The Tony Kornheiser Show, when he does it, is 2 o'clock here on ESPN 630. So Jay Gruden is trying to make a media career. He does a lot on Twitter. I don't know if he's landed anything in terms of network work. I think that's his goal. He said that he's through with coaching. He's 57 years old and kind of realizes that it's not going to happen for him. I don't know if the issues with his brother have anything to do with this. John Gruden is still suing the NFL, though he's been allowed to. I don't know if there's any rules against this, but I think he's been helping out with the Saints and a couple other teams. He's got a podcast, and I guess Jay Gruden probably benefited from his brother being John Gruden. I think it helped him to become an offensive coordinator with the Bengals and then head coach here. Dan Snyder tried to, of course, get John Gruden. When he couldn't get him, he got Jay Gruden. And, he did make the playoffs once, but I'd say by and large, not a successful run here. It's the only coach he ever extended. He never extended another coach in the 24 years except Gruden. And that was really to create a distraction because they were firing Scott McCloughan, who I thought had done a pretty good job in 2 years as the GM. He's the one that built that playoff team for Gruden in the 2015 season. I think that was the reason they decided to get rid of him. Tried to portray him as a drunk, and and said ridiculously when he didn't show up, when he wasn't at the combine, he's still dealing with a death in his family. It was his grandmother who died a month before at the age of 100. So it was all part of the dysfunction of the whole mess that was going on. But in 2019, after a bad start, he was drafting Dwayne Haskins when he didn't want to have Dwayne Haskins, and they played a game against the Patriots. I think Haskins started that game, got their doors blown off, and Jay Gruden got fired. Everybody kind of knew it was going to happen. But here are the details that Gruden talks about when he was on a podcast the other day, which is hosted by Colt McCoy, who was quarterback here for Gruden for a few years. And he has, on this podcast, McCoy has two of his offensive linemen from the past working with him, A.Q. Shipley and Justin Pugh, both played with him at his last stop in Arizona. And Gruden discussed how the firing went down when he was dumped 5 games into the 2019 season.
There was a lot of indications going into that season that I was really on the hot seat. Number one, usually in training camp, they gave our coaches, my assistant coaches, another year extension. That didn't happen. I go, great. Must be something they're thinking about if something doesn't go well. We had a couple draft issues where I had some major disagreements and didn't keep them to myself like I should have. But once the season got going, we failed to do things we were supposed to do. Case Keenum was our starter. We drafted a young quarterback. He wasn't quite ready to play. You were coming off an injury.
Yeah, I was on IR.
Yeah, but you were in training camp. You were trying to come back. So we really had a three-way battle, which you can never have at quarterback. It's not fair to any one of you three guys to try to have, okay, you got the first two, you got the next two, you got the next two. Next day we'll flip them. You're at the ones, twos, and threes. Nobody gets better. Everybody gets worse. Anyway, we started out poorly, lost at the Giants. We lost a couple games. Then we played the Patriots at home. And I thought I was going to get fired after the Giants game week 4. But after week 5, we played the Patriots, lost, I think, 30-6 or something like that. And I'm sitting at home. I'm miserable. And I get a call from Bruce Allen, and he says, hey, come to the office at 5 in the morning. And it was like 10 o'clock at night when he called. I went straight to the office, like right around 11:30, 12 o'clock, packed up all my shit because I knew it was about to go down. I wasn't going to let them lock me out of my goddamn office. I was going to make sure I got my important stuff. And sure enough, at 5 o'clock in the morning, I went in there. Dan and Bruce and a couple other people were in there. I just said, thanks for the opportunity. And is there any chance I could say goodbye to the team or, at a team meeting? And they said, no, we'll let Bruce will speak for you. I go, I don't want Bruce to speak for me. Just forget it. I have no idea why I couldn't say bye to the coaches or team. That was the one thing that bothered me the most. It was okay to get fired because coaches get fired. That's the way it is. If you don't win, you get fired. But not to be able to say bye to like Colton guys that I coached with, it was pretty disappointing.
It's such a results-driven business that whenever, the run game's bad, you start catching all the noise and pressure from above, and it all rolls downhill and eventually gets to the players, and it's like, all right, let's, we haven't run the ball very well these first 3 weeks. Let's do an extra period of 9-on-7 today, or we're going to add 6 more plays of 9-on-7. We're going to go 2 days of pads this week, and all of a sudden we're going to run for 150 this week. It's like, what the hell are we even talking about here? Like, we're not running the ball because we stink up front. We don't have a good back. Like, it's that simple. Like, let's figure out another way to gain yards and win a game. Like, that's my.
You would have liked me, AQ, because I was the opposite. I never liked 9. I hated 9-on-7. I was always afraid of one of my good linemen getting hurt because of some slappy defensive lineman free agent rolling on a guy's ankle, and I tried to keep those 5 to 8 offensive linemen as healthy as long as I could, and it never happened for me. I mean, my last 2.5 years at Washington, I went through like 30 linemen a year. It's the damnest thing ever. So I don't know how to keep you all healthy. I tried. Didn't do any 9-on-7s, that's for sure.
I would have loved that. I would have loved that.
That's why Callahan hated me so bad, because he thought I was too soft. I'm like, Bill, I can't afford to lose another guy. Our backups are awful. Hey, we're going to the practice squad. We're calling guys on the streets. I'm putting tape on guys' helmets. Smith. Oh, hey, Smith, how you doing, buddy? Here's a snap count this week. On 1 is white 85, white 80, said Hut. All right. This was week 5. I mean, it was horrible. Yeah.
At least you got your stuff. Salah apparently didn't even get his stuff out of his office.
They got him in London. That's a bad move by the Jets, man. That's not fair. At least they gave me like 6 hours notice, so it gave me time. I didn't get any sleep that day, but I was able to sleep a lot after I got fired, so that worked out fine. I was actually relieved that year. As competitive as I am, as how much I love to coach, that year was really not a good year for me. It was too many people pulling in different directions. The scouting staff, the Gia, Bruce, everybody was. Dan Snyder went silent on me. I never talked to the guy. He used to come into my office pregame and give a pep talk or whatever. Never saw him for 5 weeks. It was just some players were chirping, the guys I wanted to cut and couldn't cut. But it was just a bad year. It was kind of a relief. I miss it now, but at that time, it was actually kind of a relief to get the hell out of there.
Well, I would have been relieved if Dan Snyder wasn't coming in my office anymore before games to give me a pep talk. What could that guy have said of any value to his head coach before a game? Now, not that Jay Gruden was a great coach. And, some of this stuff, I don't know whether it's related to it or not, but they used to refer to it as Club J. They had a safety by the name of Swearinger, DJ Swearinger, who said, we don't work hard enough. We don't practice hard enough. And they cut him for that. So some of this falls on Jay, but it was a completely dysfunctional organization, a complete mess. And maybe some of that Club J was related to all the injuries they had, particularly on the offensive line. They actually won a couple of games along the way with Kirk in years earlier, where Kirk was introducing himself to his offensive linemen in the locker room. They won a game in Seattle like that. They were underdogs in that game, and they had mess on the offensive line, and they had just signed a couple of guys off the street. And I don't even know if they were there for the Saturday practice. They flew and they met the team in Seattle and played and started, and somehow they won. But, yeah, I mean, those are just – I play those things because it just shows you what a dysfunctional mess this was in the Dan Snyder era. And when he's talking about Bruce Allen butting in with things and you know, all the chaos that was happening there and the crappy way that they handled it. Now, you know, when Bill Callahan took over, it wasn't like all the players were in mourning for Jay. I don't know how much they love Jay. And I since haven't heard anybody clamoring for him to come back, even as an offensive coordinator. But, you know, it was just a bad organization that did things in a very, very bad way. And that seems to be in the rearview mirror. Meantime, this is a good organization. The Steelers, they have a really interesting quarterback controversy. I don't think there's really been one like this before. It's a 4-2 team. They're playing well. Justin Fields, who they got from Chicago, is playing well for them. Russell Wilson is the veteran that they brought in and expected to be the starter. He got hurt in camp. But, you know, things are rolling along pretty good, but it looks like they're heading for a quarterback change. This was Tony and Mike yesterday on PTI with this.
The Steelers are 4-2, and Justin Fields has been the quarterback in all of those games. Russell Wilson has not taken a snap because he's had a calf injury. Now Wilson is healthy, and Mike Tomlin plans to work Wilson with the first team intermittently. Wilbon, would you understand it if Tomlin chose to start Wilson over Fields?
I'm being made to understand it. Instinctively, I don't understand it. But I'm a Fields guy, and I'll admit my bias. But we had Jeff Saturday on yesterday, and he said, wait a minute, you got to remember there's practice every day.
Yeah.
And players know what they see in practice. You and I have covered enough football in our lives where we got to know, and often linemen who would come over at the end of practice
The
and
Hogs.
say, hey, listen up.
Yeah, all the time.
And when they said listen up, what did we do?
No, it's like,
we understood that what they just went through at practice was telling.
You know this story that I'm not sharing with everybody with the names involved, but a couple of linemen came over to me and he said he can't play. I said, what do you mean he can't play? Can't play like right now? No, can't play in the league.
Can't play.
They know.
They know, and they're telling you what they see in real time. And real quickly, with Fields, I said last year, the reason why I didn't want to get rid of Fields as a Bears guy is that I was hoping that better coaching would help Fields get to a point in which we wouldn't be having this discussion. He's got that now in Pittsburgh.
So
he's got that with Arthur Smith and that staff and Mike Tomlin. And they're still seeing things that he's not overcoming.
Your prejudice here makes me very happy. Because as you've said, you've sat on the show and you've said many times that you love Justin Fields and you think he could be a terrific quarterback, and he was being hurt by bad coaching in Pittsburgh.
Yep, in Chicago.
Chicago, rather. So now Mike Tomlin is there.
Yep.
And you are never going to say a bad word about Mike Tomlin because there's not a bad word to be said.
Or his offensive coordinator,
right. So
who plays to Fields' strengths repeatedly.
That's right. So if Mike Tomlin chooses Wilson over Fields, you got to eat it. You got to eat it. And
Wilson, the fact that it's gotten this close already, that Tomlin's considering it and has him out there in practice getting first team reps.
When Tomlin signed him, when he signed Wilson, he called him QB1.
Yep.
Okay?
Pole position.
He is the longest tenured coach in the league. At Pittsburgh, this is now, I believe, his 18th season. He's won a Super Bowl. He's never had a losing season.
No.
So he has an unassailable record. So if he makes this choice,
you got to live with it.
I think so. Now, what's interesting to me is Pittsburgh is at home on, I believe, Sunday night against the Jets, the Super Bowl Jets of Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers. And even though Pittsburgh is 4-2 and the Jets are 2-4, somehow on the road the Jets are favored by 1.5. I do not bet. But if I bet, I would always bet with Mike Tomlin at home as an underdog. I would always bet with that.
You know, the other part about this that I'm still trying to get my arms around is Justin Fields' personality seems to fit what it is that these Steelers are. He ran for 2 touchdowns last week.
He's got 5 running touchdowns and 5 passing.
The position is not called passer. It's called quarterback.
That's right.
But yet I'm forced to deal with.
You know that I don't think Russell Wilson is anywhere near what he was. And I do like Justin Fields.
Yeah.
But Who am I giving the benefit of the doubt to? To Mike
Tomlin and his staff.
There's no question.
And maybe in any other organization, you might say, there's pressure from ownership to play the veteran quarterback who's making more money, Russell Wilson. They made the deal with Denver to get him. There's a reclamation project. This is probably the last stop. This is 2 stops removed from his glory days in Seattle, and the ownership would be telling him, but no, that's not the way the Steelers operate. And a coach in his 18th year has total autonomy over this. So maybe he does think that Russell Wilson gives him a better chance to win. What I've seen recent years, I don't think that's the case. And you would think maybe turn the page on that, but it does not appear to be the same. It's not the same situation that Kevin Stefanski is dealing with Deshaun Watson in Cleveland, where it's pretty clear that ownership has got a gun to his head and said, you got to play this guy because he can't play anymore. Doesn't give him a chance to win. They're terrible. They're wasting a good defense. And it looks like it's ownership saying you absolutely have to play him, even though Stefanski is saying, no, it's my call. He plays. So we'll see. A couple other things here. One, baseball. The White Sox, according to Brittany Giroli of The Athletic, she says that they may be up for sale from owner Jerry Reinsdorf, who's 88 years old. They just completed one of the worst seasons in baseball history, a 41-121 season. They won one more game than the 62 Mets, but they also lost one more game than the 62 Mets, who didn't play 2 of the 162 scheduled that year. And according to Drolli, that he's in discussions with a group led by, and this is a very interesting connection here, Dave Stewart. Dave Stewart, great pitcher in his day, mostly for the Oakland Athletics. He's from Oakland. And my first thought, and I didn't really realize the background of this, my first thought, Dave Stewart, maybe he's part of a group that's interested in bringing baseball back to Oakland, even though they wouldn't play in they would want a new stadium to do that. But if they buy the White Sox, maybe they do. No. Actually, Stewart has been involved with a group that's trying to bring baseball to Nashville. And that might be something that could be in play. Now, the White Sox are trying to get a new stadium built. The stadium that they play in replaced the old Comiskey Park, I want to say, 35 years ago, something like that, maybe even less than that, and that they now call it Guaranteed Rate Field, but it's replaced Comiskey, and they're looking for a new ballpark already. It replaced an ancient ballpark, but they're looking for a new one. But is it possible that Dave Stewart is with a group trying to bring the team to Nashville? Dave Dombrowski, who's the GM of the Phillies, he was actually involved with them for a while as well. But that could be an enormous change for a team that's been, part of baseball lore, the famous Black Sox scandal. But they're in Chicago, kind of like what the Nets are in the New York area. No matter how good they are, they're always second fiddle to the Knicks. And I think the White Sox, no matter how good they are always second fiddle to the Cubs, who play in the iconic ballpark and are kind of more the darlings of baseball there. So keep an eye on that. If Dave Stewart's group does buy them, could the White Sox wind up in Nashville? That seems to be in play. Now, maybe he's there to get leverage too. Maybe this is a way that Reinsdorf is using him. Throwing the name out there to try and get a new stadium. Hey, they'll yank your ballpark. They'll yank your team out of this ballpark and go to Nashville. Look out for that. That's something to keep an eye on. And how about this? Al Pacino's got a new book out. And, we always talk about athletes going broke. Pacino didn't make that much money from The Godfather. And then his career, took off after that. He started to make movies and make money, but then his career kind of fell off, and he was dating Diane Keaton, and Diane Keaton was kind of supporting him. And he had other girlfriends. He had 2 kids with another actress. I forget her name, but she had twins with her. And he now in this book talks about his money issues. And he said he was making a lot of money. He did Godfather 3 for the money. It was a terrible movie, but he said he needed the cash and do that. But he was back on track financially. But he said, my staff was getting bigger. I was taking care of 2 homes, my apartments and an office, and supporting the households of my children. I was spending $300,000 or $400,000 a month, which is a lot of moolah. The twins, by the way, with Beverly D'Angelo, who was in the Vacation movies with Chevy Chase. By 2011, Pacino began to harbor suspicions about his accountant. The actor had splurged on a family trip to Europe, which included flights on a Gulfstream 550, a whole floor of the Dorchester Hotel, and a trip to Denmark. Back in L.A., Pacino discovered he had more money than he had before. He spent all this money on a vacation. How do I have more money? He said, I knew something was wrong. He admitted before finding out that the accountant was indeed crooked. He claims he eventually was found running a Ponzi scheme and served some time in prison. Then soon after, he was again broke. He said, I had $50 million and then I had nothing. I had property, but I didn't have any money. The kind of money I was spending, where it was going, is just crazy montage of loss. He said some of his expenses included, listen to this, 16 cars, 23 cell phones, and a landscaper who was getting $400,000 a year for landscaping a house that he didn't live in. Hoo-ah! So, this is an actor who went broke making more money than some of these athletes. And as Patrick Ewing said during a lockout, yes, we make a lot, but we spend a lot. And yes, in this case, he was spending way too much money. Okay, Bram is up next. I will see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.